Imagine this, a young Australian nurse travelling the world, and the first big trip she takes is on the Titanic. Imagine too that 28-year-old Evelyn Marsden is on the maiden voyage to follow her heart, a romance with a dashing English doctor employed by the cruise line. What happens next is one of the great stories of love and heroism, and it's all true. The untold story of the only Australian to survive the sinking of the Titanic.
There are certain periods of drama or disaster that latch onto us, and the Titanic seems to be one of them. They were so proud and they were so sure this was one of the greatest ships ever built, and it was the maiden voyage, and it was the smartest people of the world, and it was also full of the energy of that period. Whoever you are, there is someone on that ship you can relate to and you can connect with. It doesn't matter who you are.
It's 100 years since the Titanic sailed on its maiden voyage. On board were 5 Australians. Only one would survive. An adventurous 28-year-old called Evelyn, whose skills as a rower would help save many lives as the Titanic sank.
She got into one of the lifeboats and she helped row herself and the rest of the boat to safety.
So she's a bit of an unknown Australian hero.
She is a bit of an unknown Australian hero, absolutely. We should be very proud of our Evelyn Marsden.
For almost a century, Evelyn's heroism has gone unrecognised. Uncovering her story begins in an unlikely place, Port Adelaide, where Emily Jatef is curator of South Australia's Maritime Museum.
Hey Ronnie, look what we've got here.
She became aware of Australia's sole survivor last year.
She was listed as a spinster.
She was busy off seeing the world.
Prefer to think of her as a career girl myself.
Emily has her own link to the Titanic. 7 years ago, she was part of an expedition which revealed the Titanic's watery grave.
You've seen Titanic?
Yeah, in 2005, yes. And it's just absolutely stunning.
We're headed down the stairwell.
The grand staircase is actually the point of entry into the wreck because the dome popped off and floated away. It's the safest and largest point of entry for the little ROVs to go down. You know immediately what you're looking at. You say, that's the grand staircase. Holy moly, we're actually here.
Into this grand world came an Australian country girl. Evelyn's father was a station master who, when she was 15, moved their family to the remote South Australian town of Hoyleton.
As a teenager, Evelyn spent her holidays at Murray Bridge outside Adelaide, and it was here she would learn skills that would one day help to save her life.
She was taught to row on the river and, by all accounts, taught to row against the tide. And as someone who's tried their hand at rowing, that would be a very difficult activity to undertake.
All her life, I think she had this love of the sea. She didn't want to be on land nursing. She just wanted to be part of the sea and seeing the world.
She was the original Aussie backpacker.
Yeah. In those years, it's not something that you would imagine a woman of her age doing. So it would have taken a lot of guts, I think, to do that.
It's now that fate steps in. On her voyage to England, Evelyn, who'd trained as a nurse, fell in love with the ship's doctor, a young man called William James.
Oh, I think he's kind of a fox. Yeah. Evelyn did quite well there.
He was working for the Titanic's makers, the White Star Line, so she joined the company as a stewardess to be with him. But just before Titanic's maiden voyage, William was transferred off and Evelyn was left to sail alone.
You're very well equipped.
Oh, you wouldn't get far in my job without needle and thread.
Well, I think we have her character, actually. I think that is the character of Annie Desmond.
What's your name?
Oh, Annie Desmond, sir.
And your position?
Cabin stewardess in second class, sir.
I think that she is a hard-working...
Who will all be quite as difficult as their employers.
Optimistic, middle-class girl working as a stewardess in second class and also with some duties for the servants in first.
Would you like me to turn down the bed, madam? Come in.
Julian Fellows is the writer of the soon-to-be-released mini-series Titanic. On board in 1912 were over 2,200 people from all walks of life.
It's sort of the perfect disaster. It's got every element, you know, the first class with the movie stars and the countesses and the bankers, and then the people in third with everything they owned and possessed on their way to try and make a better life. I mean, there is something very haunting about it.
I have never seen such a clear sky or a calmer sea. I think we can make a little headway without frightening the horses.
There was a feeling, as you know, that it was unsinkable, and you know, I think someone said a man might sink as nature can't. You know, that was the problem.
Just before midnight on the 14th of April, the Titanic struck an iceberg.
We are 2 hours, 2.5 if we're lucky. She can't sink. She can't float.
Will you all please stay calm? You will be taken up on deck very soon. There is no danger.
The doctor supposedly came into their cabin. She shared a cabin with Miss May Sloane and gave them a fortifying glass of whiskey and water to calm their nerves before they had to do what was to happen, to try and survive and get on board lifeboats, whoever they could get on board.
There were too many people and too few lifeboats, only 20 on the ship.
The reason there weren't enough lifeboats is that the received wisdom at that time was that if a liner ever sank, which of course was very rare, it was always because of a collision. And an ordinary collision, which is quite contained, meant that the liner took an enormous amount of time to sink, and by which time there were many boats all around, and the lifeboats were just ferries to take them onto the other boats.
Evelyn assisted in getting as many passengers to safety as possible.
It's said that she was one of the last to board lifeboat 16, which I think was about 1:35 a.m. in the mornings. She wanted to make sure everybody else was on there before she was. In the end, I think they had to sort of give her a bit of a helping hand, you know, it's your turn to get in the lifeboat and get out of here.
We do know that she got into one of the lifeboats, and even though it was bitterly cold, she helped row herself and the rest of the boat to safety.
Any more for this boat? Madam, get in.
Among the many tragedies that night was the fateful decision by the Titanic's second officer,
Lower the boat.
Charles Lightoller, to only partially fill the lifeboats.
But why are so few of them full?
Too dangerous to lower them full. There's a risk they might split.
He got it into his head that the boats might split. So his idea was to put the women and children in the boats, but not fill them, lower it to the sea, and then the men would swim out. Well, A, they couldn't get down to the sea. B, they couldn't live longer than 5 or 10 minutes when they were in it, for the most part. And C, the boats, fearing the suction when the ship went down, which never in fact happened, rowed away. So the whole plan was flawed. And in the end, about 400 or 500 more people died than need have done, which is, terrible.
I find it hard to even comprehend what must have been going through her mind when she was in that lifeboat and watching all those people that had died, and it's just something that I just keep thinking about.
Is there anyone alive out there? Make a noise if you can!
Evelyn rowed for 2.5 hours until they were rescued by the ship Carpathia.
One of her descendants notes that her hands were rubbed raw from rowing all night until they were rescued.
So really, her rowing experience here in Australia
would have done her some very, very much good, yes.
Helped save her life.
Helped save her life and helped bring her on to the next phase.
With the rest of the survivors, she was taken to America, her family still in the dark about her fate.
So they had no idea that she'd even survived. They were just obviously thinking, Evelyn's not made it. We've heard, and I think she's not made it. But once she got to New York and sent a telegram to them, it is said that her father ran through the streets of Hoyleton screaming, "Evelyn's alive, Evelyn's alive."
When she returned to England, her fiancé wasted no time.
She was reunited with William, and in July of that year they were married in Southampton. They're both buried in Waverley Cemetery. She passed away on the 30th of August 1938, and he passed away 7 days later. Both together now, overlooking the sea.
Of course, if he hadn't been taken off the Titanic, he would have died, because the highest death rate was among second-class men, almost all of whom died, and the doctor would have been travelling in second class.
So this really is a remarkable love story.
Oh, it's remarkable. It's remarkable that she survived and he was transferred. This was a couple that were meant to be together.
And the series Titanic premieres on Channel 7 next month. It's from the people behind Downton Abbey. Here's a sneak peek.
Looking up from underneath, fractured moonlight on the sea. Reflections still look the same to me as before I went under.
We have had some ice warnings, sir.
Iceberg right ahead.